Mark Warren here. I want to tell you a story about the discovery of lean. Our modern lean story begins in the late 1980s with a group of professors when they landed a $5 million grant to continue their study of the future of the automobile. I'm sure the professors were awed by what they observed during their tour of 90 automobile assembly plants around the world. I can still remember visiting the Ford assembly plant in Atlanta when I was about 8 years old. I wanted to stop and watch. There was so much going on, not only in front of me, but across the ceiling were dangling whole sections of cars as if they were just toys. Everything was so amazing to me. My father had to keep dragging me along so I wouldn't get lost or hold up the tour. Lucky for the professors, they had a bright young graduate student fresh from Toyota's NUMMI factory to help them understand what they had observed. The graduate student is considered to be the source of why the Toyota production system was labeled as lean. He explained that the term fragile had been the original Japanese translation for their system, but a fragile system was hard to sell to the American managers at NUMMI. The first wave of books by Americans and Japanese alike started in the 1980s, trying to unravel the competitive advantage of the Japanese. The ensuing decades only accelerated the number of books that concentrate on describing in detail the Toyota production system. It's only in the last decade that lean's connection to the earlier American systems have been recognized. Even with all of our knowledge of what lean looks like and how to use the tools of lean, our success in adding value has only been about 1 in 4. Organizing for flow was Ono's original target at Toyota, not removing waste. Waste is only a symptom that flow is not happening. By 1920, the principles of flow had been widely published under various names and longer lists of principles. Factories were being reorganized not only in the United States, but around the world. In Japan, reorganizing for flow started in 1917 with a textile factory. In England, we have Woollard's reorganization of Morris Motors, and in Germany, the aircraft industry, just to name a few. Teiichi Ono openly claims to have studied Ford, and the secret is Ford studied Flanders. In late 1906, the board brought in Walter Flanders to run the production operations of the Ford Motor Company. Ford lost his previous auto company when the board brought in Henley Leyland. They turned it into Cadillac, and Leyland established the value of interchangeable parts. This was a painful lesson, and Ford didn't want to get replaced again, so he went off and secretly developed the Model T. Within 12 months of his arrival, Flanders had increased production more than 6 times, building 10,000 cars with 20% fewer men. Putting the processes in sequence was the most visible part of the reorganization by Flanders. There are some contemporary comments that what Flanders did was not that unusual and had been done previously in a number of other shops. This is possible because Flanders had worked as a machinery salesman for several companies and would have had the opportunity to see a large number of shops. It was not as simple as it looks, and reorganizing creates another set of problems as well. Ford's production lines were the outcome of more than 5 years of iterative experiments after Flanders left, because the team continued to improve their productivity with daily experiments. Many have credited the assembly line as Ford's competitive advantage. However, in less than a year, most of his major competitors also had assembly lines. His real secret was the knowledge base, a team that had the ability to create solutions. In another decade, they would have what we recognize today as an Andon cord system on their production lines, before Toyota Motor Company even existed. The next step in creating flow was to synchronize the processes. In lean literature, they've labeled this as takt time and calculate the pace based on the customer demand. While takt happens to be approximately the same as the consumption rate, the current explanation is only half right, missing the reason why. In an organization, think of it like a conductor leading an orchestra, keeping everyone following the musical score. No one should race ahead, and no one should lag behind. Synchronization's primary purpose is for communication between adjacent processes, then cells, then groups of cells, then departments, and so on. Getting a series of sequential processes synchronized and balancing their work content allows for the natural emergence of cells when you're able to closely couple a series of processes. There are, however, some natural limits that require the inclusion of buffers, often seen in the form of Kanban. The next step is to balance the demand pace. Don't limit yourself to just leveling the production processes. Look for solutions to level externally as well. The cranberry industry is a good case study. They have been successful in shifting the consumption habits of the consumer, shifting from cranberry sauce and adding things like juices and craisins to their lineup. They have moved away from a very narrow seasonal market to a more uniform year-round demand. Here's an early example of flow described as the progressive method. Ford's was called progressive production. It shows some details on scaling the production line, the space required, equipment, and people needed. Flanders didn't produce 10,000 cars in 12 months for Ford just by reorganizing the production lines. He applied flow to the suppliers and distribution network as well. Applying flow must happen, not only inside the production system, but on either side as well. In addition to leveling the production demand, he limited the work in process to no more than 10 days. What the professors had observed as lean was the outcome of applying the flow principles and the Training Within Industry, or TWI, programs. Teiichi Ohno tells us that he studied Ford's system and was trying to achieve flow. His first personal experience seeing a flow system happened early in his career when he was sent to benchmark a competitor's spinning factory. So, how did it happen? Was it synchronicity or a perfect storm? Consider the circumstances. Toyota was near bankruptcy, and the bank bailout took the sales department from the company. Without a confirmed sale, there's no money for parts, forcing just-in-time ordering of the parts and materials. Labor also went on strike. One of their demands was for better professional management, specifically requesting the job relations program. And, to top it off, it was estimated that their productivity was 1/10 of the Americans. Management was expecting Ohno to match the American productivity in just 3 years. On the bright side, he did have some freedom to experiment with a production shop, as he had some protection from politics by the CEO. Starting with the job instruction program, Ohno began to establish the foundation for standard work. With deliberate practice of the task in these programs, they began to acquire the patterns that are central to the Toyota production system. We can dismiss the romantic notion of the solution being thought out years before by the company founders. The development phase of the Toyota production system was rather messy and bears a close resemblance to Sorensen's insider account of the development process for Ford's production lines. After years of observation, we're beginning to recognize that the thinking patterns may be more important than the tools, and that many of these tools are an outcome of the thinking patterns. In the Toyota Kata, Mike Rother has documented 2 meta patterns in Toyota's mature lean system: the improving pattern and the coaching pattern as the core patterns of lean. For many organizations, there's a slight problem with trying to duplicate the Toyota Kata because they are trying to copy a mature system. In spite of the tremendous insight, most still struggle to get consistent results. This picture bears an uncanny resemblance to the exploration paths of Ford and Toyota early in their development cycle. I'm sure we can do a little better than this by observing how they develop their production systems. It's easy to accept that our learning in school progresses in a layered manner, each layer building on the one before. We found a similar pattern in the development of the Toyota production system. So let's start at the beginning. There is a natural progression of learning to see problems, the weak points, where the waste is, and building some structure into our system. This can be done with a number of practice exercises, using the discovery habits, and using the job breakdown template to define our processes. On top of this layer, we continue developing our thinking patterns or habits. We learn to think and establish stability by solving problems within our system. With the skills learned in the previous layers and the deeper knowledge of our processes gained with learning by doing, we can become truly effective at simplifying our systems. In the mature system stage, we continue to apply all of the skills that we have learned along our journey and grow people by teaching them the same patterns. Teiichi Ohno started building the Toyota production system with less information than you now have. So take the leap and start your quest today. If you would like more information, please contact Mark Warren. Thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation.